Hey everyone, welcome back to Mistake Man. This video is part 7 of my build series of the USS Voyager. As you can see, I've got the ship, the two halves of the ship fully assembled. Last time we left off on the previous video is that it hadn't been completely assembled yet, the two main halves of the hull. Those are now glued together. The ship is sealed up. I've started doing a little bit of seam work around here. There's some light blocking to do still. That's not quite finished. And the ship is not 100% assembled because I've still got to do the auxiliary deflector here. After I paint behind there, I've got to put on the main deflector piece after I paint it. And the warp nacelles are still missing their Bassard intakes. Once I get the light blocking done and I'm satisfied with that, I've still got to do a little bit around here as well. There's some light leaks. But once I've got the light blocking handled to my satisfaction, then I'm going to begin doing the major painting. Getting close to the end of this project, and it's time to start thinking about the display base, or at least putting more thought into it. I have thought about it a little bit, but it's time to actually start doing some stuff and seeing what's going to work. My idea all along has been to support it here at the power connection. So I'm using this audio jack as the power connection. That's this here. And I'm going to basically insert that into this piece of pipe that I've got here. It's a copper pipe. I didn't do that because I wanted the color of copper or anything. It was just a scrap that I had laying around and it was about the right size. So it's what I'm going with. This is longer than I want. I'm going to cut it down to size once I figure out exactly how long I want that to be. But that's the idea. I put the jack in there. It's a little wobbly and spinny in there. So once I'm ready to kind of lock things down, I think I'll just put some epoxy in there to kind of lock it in. And then I've got the wires coming out the bottom of that. And then basically the base will be able just to hold up the model like that. And because the power jack is, well, just the nature of the audio jack, I should be able to just kind of rotate the model a little bit without worrying about disrupting any wires or anything. And not that I intend to rotate it a lot, but a little bit just gives it some safety, and also just, I might be able to pose it or whatever. But then the idea is to put that on a display base. Hell, let me take this out. It's too long to fit in the shot right now. But have a display base and have the ship maybe, I don't know, that far or so off of the display base, and then have the top surface of this display base be a mirror, so that way you can see the detail underneath the ship. So that's kind of been my idea all along. I didn't really feel like building a wooden box for the display base. That just didn't sound like fun to me, so I decided to go and look in like home decor to see if I could find like a shadow box or something that I could use as the starting point for my base. Then I can put the mirror on and mount the pipe in the middle and everything. And so I found this, which is like a home decor thing, but it's like a blank sign. I drew that and cut that hole. It was just all blank white. But it's like a sign or something, so you could paint your own picture on it, or apply like vinyl lettering or something to make your own little cutesy sign to hang in your house. It's got some depth to it so that I can mount the circuit board inside and the power switch and the components inside. And also I can put the mirror on top, and the pipe can mount in the middle. It's kind of got this fiberboard stuff, kind of like masonite or something, masonite board that is sturdy enough it'll give me some rigidity to kind of help hold the pipe, the model up on the central pipe. And I've got a piece of mirror here. It's all grody looking just because it's got a protective plastic film on it. It actually is nice and smooth and shiny when you take the film off. But I'm going to keep that film on as long as I possibly can just to protect it. Because this is not a glass mirror. This is a plastic. I didn't want to deal with trying to cut glass or anything like that, especially since I need to put a hole through the middle. I just did not want to deal with that. So I went with just like clear acrylic that has a mirror backing on it. And I wasn't sure if that was going to look okay, but I ordered some just to see how it is, and it looks just fine for this application. So I'm glad I did that. As you can see, the piece of mirror that I have is not wide enough for this base. There's some extra. The base extends past the mirror on both sides. There was another base that I was looking at that was smaller than this, but it was quite a bit smaller. In fact, you can kind of see. Let me adjust my camera here. You can kind of see right here on my cutting mat. I laid out a few pieces of tape. I took a picture of this other sign that I was looking at that was smaller, and it had the dimensions listed on it. I took it home before I bought them. I hadn't decided what to get yet. And I put these pieces of tape here to kind of help me get an idea of how big the base would be relative to the ship, the model. And so you can see from this corner way over here onto the left side of the screen, that bottom left corner to that top right corner, that's the dimensions of the other base. As you can see, was quite a bit smaller than this one. I didn't like it. It would have worked, I guess, if push came to shove, but I did like the size of this one. While I was at the store pondering which base to get, I was aware that this base here was wider than the piece of mirror that I have. But again, I thought I just liked the size of this better, and I thought I could probably just like cut a section out of this one and splice the two remaining pieces together just to shorten it up enough. So while I'm standing there in the aisle comparing this one to the smaller one, I'm like, yeah, I can cut this one and make it smaller. Yeah, I like that. So I decided to go with this one. As you can see, it's the one I have. Then I got it home and started thinking about, okay, how exactly am I going to cut this, and how am I going to splice it together and do it in such a way that it's strong enough that when I put the model in, it's not going to just like come apart and not be a good support for the structure for the model. And I thought of ways to do that, how to make that happen. But the more I thought about it, I was like, that's going to be a lot of work. I mean, it's doable, but at that point, I'm probably doing as much work, if not more work, than it would have taken to just build a custom base from scratch. And so as soon as that occurred to me, I hated the idea, because like I said, just building a base from scratch just didn't sound fun to me. Doing all this extra work to cut it down didn't sound fun to me. So I started thinking of other ways I might go about that. And while I was playing with ideas in my mind, one idea occurred to me. So this, I am going to cut the width this direction so that it fits, more or less like that. So, so I cut it about here, so it's the proper width for this base. So I will cut this, but I can't make it longer, can't make it wider. So the idea was like, I don't have to have the mirror go all the way to the edges. I can just have, just like a wide border on either side of this, and that could work. So I started thinking about ways of doing that, just to kind of cover that up and just kind of dress it up a little bit so it looks nice. And at one point I even thought, well, maybe maybe it doesn't have to be symmetrical. I can just shift the mirror down to one side, have all of the extra be over on one side, and then over here I can put my power switch, and it might be kind of fun to make this look like a little control panel with like some LCARS buttons that light up. That might be kind of fun. That idea did actually interest me, so I decided to try that, designing something for that, and I think the idea would be to 3D print the parts for that, and then on the corners over here and here, just a small piece that just kind of covers the corner and grabs onto the mirror, so it kind of holds the mirror in place. I was playing with the ideas of kind of covering up all the edges of the mirror, because I thought it might look a little unfinished to have the cut edges of the mirror as part of the finished display, but these cut edges on this are actually pretty good. Like, they're very straight, very square, and pretty smooth. There's a little bit of saw marks on it, but they can actually be sanded down to be smooth. So I actually don't mind the look of the raw edge for most of it. So I would just really need to hold it in the corners, and that would be okay. And so my idea was just to kind of 3D print a couple of little brackets that might go on the corners here, and then just some pieces to make it look like a control panel over on this side. So this is the design I came up with after playing around with it for a little while. So this is the mirror, of course. Here's the central part with the pipe or the tube that's going to hold the model, with a little bracket to hold it in place, and also like it'll be a cover to cover the circular hole in the middle, just in case I can't cut that very well. If it's a little jaggedy, then I'll just have that kind of a cap that not only holds the pipe in place but also covers that. Makes it look nice. And then so the kind of the inner edge that runs along there, that inner edges of the rectangle are the actual edges, the cut edges of the mirror, right? So if the mirror's kind of set back in like that, then there's kind of a bracket there that holds that corner, a bracket there for that corner, and then on this side we've got kind of a control panel situation. There's going to be my power switch, so that'll just be a button. This is inspired by the power switch for my warp core build that I made. It was a little Star Trek insignia that has a little latching push button switch underneath it that's just integrated. So I want to use the same idea here, but instead of the TNG symbol, the TNG Starfleet Delta Shield, I'm going to use the Voyager version of that with the bars instead of the disc behind it. And then just a little light up LCARS panel here. I'm not going to make it like actual buttons that function to do things. That's way overkill for what I want. I just want it to look nice, and I think it'd be kind of fun to build that. So that's the idea, and I think that'll look good. So yeah, I've got my design. I just need to 3D print it and see how it looks. Okay, I've got my mirror cut down to size. I've got the central hole cut out of it, and it's cut the widthways here. So I think that's pretty much what I want. It actually goes this way, like that, and that puts the hole basically in the middle of the hole, like the display base itself. That hole is centered in both directions. Got a few of my parts printed. So here's one of the corner brackets. Holds the mirror in place like that. The mirror just slides up underneath. There's a little spot for the mirror there. Here's my other corner bracket, just identical to that one. And that goes there. Adjust things on my desk so you can see the other end. Okay, here's the piece for where the switch goes. That's going to go on that corner. There's the piece for the top. Then this portion here where the screen goes, it's mostly just flat, and I didn't really want to just print a big flat piece. That seemed like a waste of time and energy. So I decided to make that out of sheet stock. And so I've got that piece here. That's kind of the frame around the window, or the control panel. And that's just some 2mm sheet styrene with a little bit of a thing here to cover that edge and to cover along this edge of the mirror. I did want to cover this edge. I didn't care about the other edges, but I did want to cover this edge because I didn't want you to be able to see down, inside the display base past that edge. That's not a problem on the other edges, but on this one it is. And then for the kind of the bezel running along here, I didn't want to build that out of styrene because I wanted that kind of chamfered shape to it. So I did go ahead and print a piece for that. So that goes between like that, just along that edge. And then this fits down in between like that. And there we go. That's the gist of it. Still would need to put the screen in. I think I'm probably going to just use some clear acetate sheet, and I'm going to cut some paint masks for the buttons, and I'll put those on the back, and then I'll spray black paint on the back side to light block and make, the dark black. All the areas around the buttons will just be black paint, and then I'll take the masks off, and that'll leave the buttons clear, and then I'll put a light diffuser behind it, and then color them somehow. I might color the diffuser itself, or I've got like clear paints that I could use to color the buttons, but those are like bright jewel colors, which I don't think that would look right for the Alcars display. Those are typically very almost pastel colors. So I'm going to see if I can try and replicate that. Not sure how yet, but I'll figure that out. And then I'll just put a couple strips of LED or something in here to light that up. And yeah, I think it's going to look cool. Here's my button for the button switch cover. So the switch is just going to be this little latching switch that will go in. It's got a nut that holds that in place, and the button is going to come up through the hole there like that, and the little hex nut goes in like that. Spin that on till it goes tight. There we go. And then that just pops onto the button. And there we go. I've got myself a little button. Turn the power on and off. Haven't figured out what colors I'm going to paint this yet. I think I'm going to leave the base itself just this black, this painted black wood. I think that looks fine. This, probably just some Starfleet panel. Maybe metallic, but I don't want anything too flashy. Maybe just gray. Couple of shades of gray. I've got these little little panel raised details at the top here and next to the switch there. Might do those as kind of a darker gray and then a lighter gray for the rest of that. And then for the button, probably silver and gold. Oh, and then I do have my original design for these like end caps was just kind of like that tall, to about right there on the ends, but I didn't quite like the way that looked. I liked it better to like extend it all the way down. And so to kind of match that on these corners, I've got these pieces that I made that are just going to fit on like that on the front and the back. And then also kind of on this edge here, which is similar to, the corner where it grabs the mirror. This is kind of the corner where it grabs the mirror. just got another piece that fits in. It's going to go right about there. It's kind of hard to see from this angle. Let me adjust my lighting. There you go. I think that just kind of makes it a little bit more cohesive as a thing, rather than just like some weird stuff piled on top of a rectangular base. It looks like it's more of a complete unit this way. For the display tube itself, the support tube, I made a bracket here that's going to hold the tube and let the power cords come out. This all needs to be underneath this board that's kind of in the middle here. So I need to cut a hole for this bracket, and then this will sit inside the hole and kind of rest on this edge here. So it'll rest along that edge there through the hole and kind of sit on top of there. I made this little notch just so that it doesn't twist in there. So that'll kind of stay in place. And then I've got a place for the power cords to come out, or I guess go in to the model from the switch over here. So that'll go in the middle there. And then to support the mirror, I don't have the hole cut for this yet, so this is a little tricky to show, but the mirror's going to go over that. That'll be down underneath the mirror. And then to support the mirror in the middle, I probably don't need that, honestly. I thought I might, just in case it was a little wobbly, but like this 2.5 millimeter thick acrylic, it's really not that wobbly. Like if I push hard on it, it deflects, but it's not bad. So I might not need it, but I had basically this piece that would go underneath and support the mirror in the middle. So it would kind of go on top of that piece in between the whiteboard down here and then the bottom of the mirror. So that would kind of support that. And then this piece is the part that goes over this hole here, just to cover that cut edge, make it look nice. And then the tube will go through that down into all this. So it'll kind of look like that stacked up, and in between there will be where the mirror goes, that gap there. And I think that'll be enough. It's gripping enough of the tube that the tube shouldn't, want to like wobble back and forth too much. I could probably epoxy the tube in place once the time comes. I hadn't really thought about that. Not sure about that. We'll see if it's necessary. But yeah, that's how it's going to be. I'll probably paint that, probably just black, just to be kind of nondescript and nice looking. The rest of this you won't be able to see. So probably over-engineered this whole bracket system, but that's okay. It was fun. It's fun to be able to just like come up with ideas and then practically push a button and it turns into a real thing. Like, honestly, 3D printers are like primitive replicators for real. And that fact still just blows my mind. I've been working on the LCAR's little control panel thing, part of the display stand, and I've got the black mask in place. I just used a sheet of acetate, like clear craft plastic. I masked it off using some vinyl masks that I cut. I don't know if you'll be able to see. You can see the cut lines there. So I cut some masks in this vinyl sheeting. You can see I actually had to do it twice because the first one actually went on, the masks went on just so nicely. Got everything lined up. Despite a couple of close calls, the masks went on great. I was getting ready to paint, and I realized I put the masks in the wrong place. It was it was shifted too far up and too far to the left. So, so I just had to peel the masks off and do it again. So, second time was the charm. I managed to get them on in the correct position. And then I sprayed a couple of coats of Tamiya black, just flat black, on the back. Yeah, and I'm doing that on the back so that on the front it's nice and glossy and flat, like a TNG era control panel is supposed to be, or Voyager. And yeah, it looks really good. There are a couple spots where I had to touch it up. There were just tiny little like pinpoints of light shining through the Tamiya paint. So I went back just with some black craft paint to fill in those holes. I just didn't want to try touching up the paint with Tamiya paint, because it, if I pushed it around too much, I was afraid it would dissolve it and start, affecting the layer of paint that I already had down, and you'd be able to see weird stuff from the front. So I just used the acrylic stuff to touch up those holes. And so now I got to do the color for the buttons. They also need to diffuse the light, right? Because right now they're perfectly transparent. You can see everything behind them, which is not what I want. They need to be diffuse. I've had a lot of success with diffusing light using vellum, but it's got a bit of a texture to it, and where this is so clear and having the vellum right up next to it, you'd be able to see the texture of the vellum, and I don't want that. So I think instead I'm going to use some some just white styrene sheet that is very thin. So I've got this 5/1000ths of an inch or 0.13 millimeters thick styrene sheets. It is paper thin stuff, and it is white, but when it's backlit it does transmit light nicely, and it diffuses it really well. It does tend to make the light a little bit warmer as it comes through. Kind of warms up the color of the light a little bit, but that's okay. The Elcar's displays are typically kind of a warm color palette, and I think I'm going to go with just 3 colors. I've got these Tamiya clear colors that I want to use. I'm going to use orange, yellow, and blue. And I might do some like variations in shading, because like some of them are like lighter, could be like a lighter orange, and some a darker orange, and like a lighter yellow and a more vivid yellow. Just from looking at reference images of Elcar's control panels on the TV shows, there's quite a bit of variation in color and shade of different colors. So there's a lot of options. So if these warm up a little bit, it's going to look just fine, I think. So the idea will be to paint the color onto the white styrene, basically in the areas where the buttons and the stripes are. And then I can put that colored sheet behind, and then when the light shines through, I think that'll end up looking good. Just needs new batteries. It's kind of dim, but that's the plan. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a shot. Okay, here's the sheet with the colored buttons. As you can see, I went pretty pale. I didn't want to do these really vivid, so I just kind of did a light coat of the orange and the yellow and the blue. I didn't want it to be really, deep, vivid colors. And once I shine the light through, it's even more pale. So let's give that a try. Shine a light behind that. It's not very noticeable with the workspace light on, so let me turn that off. Something like that. The camera's definitely washing it out more than it is in person. You can barely tell the difference between the yellow and the orange on camera, but it's more noticeable in person. But the colors are nice and pale, which is what I was going for. Wanted more of like a pastel or sort of pale look to it. So I think I got what I liked here. To paint this, I just used a printout of my design. Just used a hobby knife to cut out the buttons and then use this paper as a mask. I taped the plastic sheet to the back of this and then just used post-it notes to kind of mask over the different buttons for the different colors. So I masked, everything except for the yellow spots, and then did the yellow buttons, and then did the orange, and then the blue. And I only taped around the edges just to keep the sheet in place. So, the middle part of the mask wasn't like stuck down to the plastic, so there isn't like a nice sharp edge here. If you look up close, you can see the edges are a little bit fuzzy. But I wasn't too worried about that because, that's going to be behind the black mask here. So as long as that's covered, it's not an issue. And I didn't think it would only be an issue if it's, sprayed so much beyond one of this that it got into the visible portion of another button, then that'd be a problem. And I didn't think that would be too likely with this, so I just decided to try this out, and it did work. It worked just fine, so I'm happy with that. There is, if I get this lined up as good as I can, there's still like one spot right there where there's some white showing through on those two blue ones. So I might need to touch those up. I don't know. It might be difficult to touch up just that little portion without like getting a difference in shading. Like if I spray just right there, it's going to be a little bit darker around there. Trying to shade match that might be a little difficult. So I don't know. I might just have to live with that, but we'll see. We'll see how much it bugs me and if I decide to do something about it. But it's really not too bad, considering how janky my setup was here, but it turned out to work pretty good. I actually had to do it twice because the first time I did the orange and then the yellow, and then I needed to do the blue, but I didn't wait long enough for the yellow to dry before I started doing the blue, and I masked over this button here, and the sticky note that I used for the masking got stuck to the yellow paint, and when I pulled it off, it left a big mark there, which was really obvious. So I tried to repair it by spraying some more yellow over it, but that didn't really work too well. So then I tried just cutting that portion out, and then I was going to glue another piece of styrene in there and paint it again. But when I was gluing it in, the glue kind of leaked out and got into the visible portions of some of the surrounding buttons, so it just ruined my first attempt. Well, here, I'll show you my shameful work. So I tried to glue this button in to kind of repair that, to patch that, but when I was putting some glue back here, I was using the thin cement, and it leaked out and got into the other buttons, so that was a bust. Had to redo that one. So I was more careful about it at this time. And I also didn't spray this button with as much. You can kind of see this one looks a little bit darker than this one. I did try to maybe do like a lighter yellow on this and then like that. But then I was trying to go with maybe a more vivid yellow just to have some variation on the buttons. And you can see I did it on this one. It's darker than this one, and you can also see it's a little bit shinier just because there's more of that, glossy, clear yellow on there. In the end, it doesn't make that much of a difference. There's a little bit of a difference when the light's shining through. You can see this is a little bit more of a vivid yellow, but it's pretty subtle, so it wasn't really worth worth the effort on that. So, okay, so there's one last thing that I need to do for this, is that my original design had some words on the buttons. You can kind of see it here in my original design that there's those kind of black blobs are just like little abbreviations of words. They're a little too small to tell what they say here, but might be able to see them a little better here on this example that I printed out with them reversed for masking purposes. You can kind of see data, power, engineering, life, etc. So I had those built into the masks, but when I went to actually go cut, I loaded the design into the vinyl cutter design software, and when I was getting ready to cut those, like the words, only like half of the lines for the words would actually import into the software. And I think the reason why is that just some of those edges for those words are just too small for the cutter to actually make those little shapes. You can kind of see here how small those words are. Here's my hand for scale. They're pretty small, so like some of those lines in there are pretty short, really tight little curves on like the R's and the S's, little inside curves on those S's. They're just very tiny. So I think the software was just like, nah, I can't do that. So it just didn't even bother importing those lines. So I had to come up with a plan B for the words. And so then I thought, well, my printer can print these words just fine. As you can see here, this is like the actual scale. So maybe I can try making decals out of these and just putting the decals on. The problem with the decals and printing them is that I'm not going to be able to print them super black like this, like I would be able to get with the paint. So some light is going to go through, but if I double or even triple up the decals and stack them on top of each other, then that's going to block more light with each decal. And so maybe just 2 would be fine, or if not 2, maybe 3 would be fine. So I figured, hey, let's give it a try. So I made some decals, and they've got to be backwards because I want to put them on the back so that from the front you don't see, like the decal raised up. The bump of the actual decal film. I don't want to see that, so I want this to be a nice smooth surface. So I'll put the decals on the back, so I needed to reverse the words. And yeah, I think I'm ready to give it a try. We'll see how it looks. Okay, I got the decals applied, and then I started getting carried away with doing other stuff and started masking this off in order to paint the frame, and realized, no, I hadn't recorded showing you the decals, so I want to do that before I get it all masked off. So you can definitely tell they're decals, especially when the color sheet isn't on, but it definitely looks better with the color on. So yeah, it turned out pretty good. At first, I thought I was going to put the decals here, even though I'd printed them in reverse, the words in reverse. I thought I could just flip it around and put it on here. And the first one I tried, but when I put it up against the clear sheet, it reflected the light in a way that was just really obvious that there was a decal behind there. So I decided instead to try doing it just on the clear sheet, my original plan, and that ends up looking better. I was worried that it would be obvious that it was a decal from doing it that way, but it actually looks better this way. So that's what I did for the rest of them. When the light hits it just right, you can tell that it's a decal, but for the most part it looks it looks pretty good. It's not perfect, but I'm happy with it. I ended up layering 2. I had 4 copies of each word on here, and I ended up layering 2 in order to get the amount of light blocking, a sufficient amount of light blocking. I didn't want to push my luck with 3, so I just left it at 2. It was good enough. I started adding some styrene here to basically make a little light box where just the panel is going to be. So that's going to essentially just kind of block off light from spilling into the mirror portion of the display, and just keep it underneath here. And once it's finally glued in place, then I'll go in and do just like some tulip around the edges to block off the rest of the light. And I also installed a light strip here. I angled it down just a little bit just so that I wouldn't get really bright hot spots right here, and to kind of spread the light out a little more evenly across the face. There's still a bit of a gradient. You can tell it's brighter on this end than it is on this end, but it's good enough. So now I'm just masking off the control panel portion so that I can paint the frame. Okay, I've got my pieces of the base painted. I put a base coat of the Tamiya Fine Surface Primer in gray. And I intended to paint just this drizzle gray as kind of the main color of the base pieces. But then I realized that is like really, really close to the Tamiya Fine Surface Primer gray. And so I decided, hey, why bother putting another coat of paint over that? That's just fine. So I didn't do that. That's just the color you see is just the primer. And then for the extra little accents on the 2 pieces here, I just wanted a bit of a darker gray. So I went with this Bridgeport gray. It's got kind of a slightly bluish tint to it, which I thought looked nice for the control panel. So yeah, that turned out well. I like it. For the middle piece, that's where the tube is gonna go. The supporting tube is gonna go through that. I just painted that black, and the rest of the pieces are just in the primer gray. Those don't have any detail accents or anything that are a different color. And then for the comm badge, Delta Shield, switch button cover, I just went with the classic metallic look to that. Just did a Tamiya titanium silver for the Delta Shield itself. It had kind of has a warm tone to it that I liked a bit more than just like a chrome silver. It's got just a warmer tone to it that I liked. And then for the bars, I didn't want to go with like a bright gold. I did a bright gold on the push button switch for my Warp Core model from the next generation. I thought the gold looked right for that. But for Voyager, I wanted something a little darker, a little more muted. And so I went with this Vallejo bronze. Just model color bronze. I liked the look of that. Just a bit darker. I thought it was a little more fitting for Voyager. And then here's the LCARS panel with the frame painted and it's all glued in place. And it looks good. I like the way that turned out. I've been looking at this panel and thinking that something was just not quite right with it. Like the colors just maybe seem a little bit too vivid. Although when it's backlit, that tends to wash out the colors, desaturate the colors so they're not quite as vivid. And so it ends up looking right when it's lit, but when it's not lit, it just seems like, what's wrong? It just seems like maybe it's, I don't know, too bright. So I'm trying to figure out why that is. And then it occurred to me that instead of painting this on a clear piece of plastic, I should have mounted all of this onto like a dark colored piece of transparent plastic, like a smoked glass kind of look, because all the panels on Star Trek, when the lights on the panel are turned off, the panel is just black. It's dark. You can't really see the buttons shining until they're lit, and then they shine through. And I think that would have made the difference. I probably wouldn't have had a dark enough piece that they'd completely disappear when the lights were off. You'd still be able to see them, and that would be okay, but they would be much more muted until the light was on, and then they would be lit up like a control panel. And so yeah, I should have done that. Next time I do an LCARS panel, I'm going to try that. I think that would make the difference. So I'm not going to change it now. I'd have to redo this entire thing, because it's all like, well, it's all assembled, but also like everything's painted onto the clear plastic itself. I'd have to start over, and I don't want to do that. I'll just live with it the way it is. But next time I'll do the dark plastic and give that a try. So for the base, I've got this centerpiece is glued and epoxied into place, just so that it should be nice and sturdy. And then for the blinker board, it was a little too tall. My original idea was to either have it mounted underneath here, where there's a bit of a gap underneath, or on top where there's even more of a gap. But with those capacitors sticking up, it was just a tiny bit too tall to fit in here without just the mirror resting on top of those capacitors. I just didn't want to do that. So I ended up just cutting out a portion of the board and of the wooden board, and then mounting the circuit board just underneath it like that with some hot glue. And then I had to cut a pass-through for the wires to get underneath, because they have to hook up to the power switch and then connect all together with the wires coming from the model, and then an actual power connector. So I'm using just one of these like barrel socket type connectors, and it all needs to be wired up still. But my original plan was to use one of these panel mount style barrel connectors for the power, but it's too tall to fit there, and I didn't really want to have to try and mount it through that thickness of the wood there. I just didn't think, I don't know, I just didn't want to mess with it. So I just went with one of these connectors and then cut out a little hole for it. And that's going to be in the back, essentially. So, you know, I don't care that that's kind of a rough hole. The panel, like the fake panel, will be mounted here, and then the Delta shield will be mounted there. So this is basically kind of the front edge of the display base. So I'm good with that. And then when it's not, you know, when it needs to be plugged in, I can pull it out and just plug it in. And then when it's not plugged in and it's just sitting on the shelf for display, I can pull that in. And then I just kind of added that this was originally the little picture hanging hook that was mounted onto the back of this sign. I took that off because I don't want it there, and I was able to just kind of bend it and fix it in there to kind of hold that power connector out of the way, so that way it doesn't get in the way of just setting the display base on a shelf. Okay, let me get everything all kind of laid out here so you can see what the final thing is going to look like. Okay, there it is. It's not glued together, it's just assembled. There's little gaps down here. That's just because those parts are going to be glued up to the underside of this piece here. But for now, they're just kind of resting in more or less the places they're going to be. And then this button isn't actually, the switch isn't in there. So when the switch is connected, the button does sit up just a little bit above that, so that, you know, you can push it down. Right now it's sitting farther down into that hole than it would with the switch attached. And then this isn't glued yet, so it's still a tiny bit wobbly. But let's get the model on there. go. So yeah, that is, the model is pulling that stand tube back a little bit. Just once I glue that in place, it won't do that, but there we go. Let me adjust the camera so you can actually see the model. Okay, there it is. So that's going to be rotatable on there. And from looking this low down, you really can't see much of the ship reflected in the mirror. But let me actually take the camera off the mount here, and I can kind of give you a bird's eye view of what that'll look like. Okay, there we go. So yeah, from looking up above, you can see the underside of the ship. The mirror still has the protective film over it, so it looks a little cloudy and messy right now. I'm going to keep that protective film on until the very last second, until the model's basically done, just to protect that surface from any scratches or scuffs. But yeah, that's the look. I like it. Alright, anyway, there's my base. I think I'm going to call it good for this video. Just want to get this video out just to give you guys an update where I'm at. Still got more to do on the ship, obviously. Got to do painting. Basically just need to, I think I've got all the light blocking done. I just need to mask all the windows and begin the large scale painting process on the ship. And then, of course, glue all the pieces of the base together. Get that all finished up. But yeah, that'll be it for this video. All that stuff will be in the next video. And anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time.